Hello, I'm Wendy. Today we're looking at watercolour tree and foliage painting, particularly looking at tone and mark making. My last few videos have been all about trees and summer flowers, and I'm always inspired by these subjects because I walk through a really pretty area every day with my dog, and it's this sort of environment that does inspire me to paint. I do love it so much, and I love painting greens. I know a lot of people don't like greens, but I love painting greens. Now it's ending now, the summer, and lots of the flowers have died off. I was walking along and I spotted this view here. I walk past this tree nearly every day, and it caught my eye because of the contrasts in the greens with the lovely dark foliage, and then these lighter areas in the front. And the painting that I'm going to do is really all about tonal contrasts, and it's a loose painting. There's not a lot of detail. I'm not trying to render the leaves and the grasses particularly as they look. I'm more interested in capturing the tonal contrasts and trying to make some interesting marks in the areas where the grasses are, as I said, rather than actually rendering the grasses in detail and making them very realistic. So that's what I set out to do in this painting, and if you're watching it and you like my channel and you like the way that I'm painting, then again, maybe you'll get some ideas and some inspiration for your own painting. And I think it makes us realise that you don't have to go and find some great vistas and views to do a little landscape painting. You can just see what's on your doorstep, what you walk past every day. If it catches your eye and you like it, then have a go at painting it. So here's the pencil drawing that I did, and I'm working on a Bockingford block, not paper. That's the surface that I like. You can see here that I'm applying some masking fluid. You don't need to do this. If you really don't like masking fluid, then you can miss it out and maybe put a little bit of gouache on. I'm leaving a little bit of space here with the masking fluid for the remains of some cow parsley that is in the photograph. And as I said, you could always leave that out or put a little bit on with some gouache at the end, some body colour. I will put a link in the description box to how to use the masking fluid. I have gone over that a lot on my previous videos. And here I've just switched brushes to an old rigger, and I like to put a few grasses on. You have to be very careful here, and I've made the mistake in the past of making these too wide. So very light touch with a little bit of masking fluid on the end of the brush, and you can suggest some of these lighter grasses. They can be left white, or at the end of the painting you can put a very light wash over them. Usually when I'm painting, I like to put a very light wash over the whole paper. I don't like to work against white, sort of working in little bits. I like to cover the paper first. So what I tend to do is to look at the photograph and try and pick out the lightest colours that I can see in an area, and then I put those in. As you can see, that's what I'm doing now. I'm seeing some of these warmer colours in the foreground, and I'm seeing some very light greens. Colours I'm using here will be the earth colours, burnt sienna, burnt umber, raw sienna, which I use in all my paintings. The greens, I'm using indigo with some yellows and some raw sienna. Now, if you like the greens that I'm using, then the video that I did, I think it was the last video, then I went into detail on how I mix the greens using indigo as the base blue. So you might want to go back and have a look at that. I do use sap green, which is the only tube colour that I use as a green. I do like to mix my greens. So you can see here that I'm building up the foreground area. There was a colour in the distance of the left-hand side which was very difficult to know what to mix. It was sort of a bluey greeny purple, so I just mixed up a very light purpley colour with ultramarine and light red. That's always a good combination to give a distant colour, and I put that in very lightly, as you can see in the distance. I'm working wet into wet on this picture now. I didn't want any hard edges in the background, so it's very loose. There's no particular rhyme or reason where I'm putting the colours. I'm just wanting to get this sort of atmosphere of distance with these colours in here. It was important to get the area dry before I continued with the greens on the tree. I didn't want to get an in-between sort of merging of colours. I wanted this to go on a nice dry surface. I'm using the dry brush technique here for the first layer of leaves, and as I said earlier, I do like to start off with the lightest colours that I can see, rather than going straight in with the dark greens. It makes it more interesting, gives the tree more depth. So it's a dry brush technique with the brush on its side, and you can see the consistency of the paint. It's not too runny, but it's got a fair amount of water in there. Again, I'm painting quite loosely, but I am keeping an eye on the reference, and I'm looking to see the shapes of the tree, which is really important, and to see where I can leave some light areas with the background showing through. It's all too easy to get a bit carried away at this stage and to block in too much, so I'm being careful to leave some spaces there. So here I'm mixing up a darker green for the next layer. The first layer would probably be just about dry. It doesn't really matter. You don't want the first layer to be too wet. But I'm mixing up a nice dark green now using the indigo and a warm yellow. I've been using New Gamboge, hue, Cotman. You can use cadmium yellow. You could even use a lighter yellow as well, but I think a warmer yellow makes for a darker green, I'm finding. So again, I'm using the side of the brush, continuing with the dry brush work and putting another layer on top of the first one. Again, keeping an eye on the reference and being careful to leave some gaps between the leaves. I like to do a little bit of splattering as well, sometimes just with plain water and with some paint to get a sort of random effect, to get a little bit more life into the painting. I switched brushes here to, it's a quill brush, which I quite like. I find these quite versatile little brushes. I have them in different sizes. This is a smaller one. If you think you might like using it and don't have one, there is a link in the description box. It's called a quill brush. It comes to a nice point. I would say be careful when you're mixing colours. If you want to mix a lot of colours, then use a different brush to mix so that you don't ruin the tip on these brushes. Using quite a dark colour here now. It doesn't matter if the undercoat was a little bit wet. I'm going to show you this in detail. It's very difficult to sort of describe how I work this, but what I'm doing here is building on top of those first layers and putting more individual leaves on there. This tree is in the foreground, so I don't think I don't like to leave the dry brush as it is. That's fine if the trees were in the distance, but if you've got a tree in the foreground, then I do like to suggest some of the more individual leaves and clumps of leaves that are on the tree. Starting work on the foreground, I'm putting in some of these darker, warm colours. I'm sticking with the same brush here at the moment, which is that nice little quill brush. And I'm building up on the greens that I put in earlier, putting some marks in, but making sure that I leave some of those initial washes showing through. This is what I was talking about mark making. I'm being a bit intuitive and a bit loose with the strokes. And working in a similar way here, I'm looking at the photograph and seeing some of the shapes that are there and putting in this next tonal layer. I'll be building up again on top of this. What I like to do is to build up the layers gradually. As long as you keep the colours transparent and quite pale, you can do this. I think watercolourists run into trouble when they start putting layers on when the paint's too thick and it builds it up and you lose the transparency and people start calling the picture overworked and muddy, and that's the reason. So you really do have to keep these washes nice and transparent and don't build up too many layers on it. Now I've left the reference here for you to look at because what's more important, I think, than rendering the detail of all the grasses and things is to make sure that you keep the tones the same, because if that's what drew you to the picture, it was partly the composition, of course, and the subject, but it was the tonal contrast that I liked here, the lights against darks. It was really quite appealing. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping those tones. So you can see it's fairly straightforward. I'm working on the darker area here, but over to the right, bottom right, that's the lightest area that is contrasting against the dark of the trunk and the sort of tones on the left hand side, which is probably the shadow of the tree. So while I'm working here, I'm trying, don't always succeed, but I'm trying to put the colour down so that I maintain the tones. It's very easy to go too dark. I've speeded this next part of the video up a little bit. It's painting in the tree trunk and the branches. I'm using indigo with some brown for the tree trunk. You could always pop a little bit of Payne's grey in as well if you wanted. Be a little bit careful with Payne's grey for darkening things because it can make things look too black. And as you can see, I'm working sort of wet into wet here and using a round brush for the trunk and moving to a smaller rigger to do the branches. And the branches are sort of intertwining between the foliage. This is why it's so important to leave the gaps in the foliage so that you can show the branches there. The rigger is a really nice brush to use for this work. If you find you've got a bit too much paint on it, then you can just get rid of a bit on a scrap of paper before you do the lightest twigs. I like to work around the picture. I don't like to generally finish anything, any particular area of the picture. I like to work around it. That's the way I find it best anyway, to work. You can judge colours and you can judge your tones. And I think if you just concentrate on doing one area at a time, you can just lose the plot and you can overwork areas. I've put the reference up here again to show you that I'm trying to concentrate on keeping the tones right here. And yes, there was a little bit of fence, so that always adds some interest. If you're putting things like fences in, then do be careful not to make them too prominent to feature in your painting. And there was a little bit of the wire showing as well. You can see on the close-up here that I'd just taken off the masking fluid before I did the fence. So it's looking very white there where the cow parsley is going to go. I didn't want it to be too distracting to the picture, and it wasn't a main feature of the painting, the cow parsley. So I knocked it back with a little bit of green, because that's what it was looking like. It was dying off after blooming in the summer and looking really pretty. And you can see here, it makes quite a difference. It knocks it back quite a lot. And I put a few little bits of darker green on there as well. I felt it needed a few more stalks on there, which I put on with a rigger and a very dark green. And I think that was just about it. Yes, just a few minor little brush strokes going on. I know people find it difficult to know when to stop, and you're not on your own. It can be difficult, but you do have to do a certain amount of fine-tuning at the end of a picture. So I think we left it there. No, we didn't. We put 1 or 2 more on. I put masking tape around this picture because I knew the composition that I wanted, and I think it looks really nice when you take it off. It does enhance the picture, doesn't it? It's like putting a mount around it. I was very pleased with this picture. It's the sort of way forward I want to go with my paintings. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me for my next video. So do subscribe if you don't want to miss anything. Bye for now.